I need advice or maybe just a place to vent. I'm feeling all kinds of betrayed right now, and I don't even know where to start. My wife Amanda and I have been married for 18 years. We've had our ups and downs like any couple, but I thought we were solid. That was until last weekend when everything kind of imploded. We got an invitation from our friends, the Smiths, for a party at their house. They're the kind of people who throw big, extravagant get-togethers with fancy food and top-shelf drinks. So I wasn't surprised when Amanda was excited. I wasn't particularly in the mood, but Amanda insisted we go. She said it would be fun to get out of the house and socialize. I caved, mostly because I didn't want to disappoint her. When we got to the party, everything seemed normal at first. Lots of people I recognized from the neighborhood and a few I didn't. Drinks were flowing, people were laughing, and it was the kind of laid-back vibe you'd expect. Then I noticed something weird. A few people were acting off. Like, I couldn't put my finger on it, but the way they interacted with each other seemed overly flirty, even for people who were tipsy. I figured I was overthinking it and tried to loosen up. About an hour in, the Smiths called everyone to gather in the living room. Amanda nudged me over, her face completely calm, like this was no big deal. That's when they started explaining the game. A bowl full of car keys was placed in the center of the room, and everyone was supposed to put theirs in. The idea was that, by the end of the night, everyone would draw a key and spend the night with whoever they picked. I swear to God, my stomach dropped to the floor. At first, I thought it was a joke, like some weird prank to liven things up. I even laughed a little nervously, waiting for someone to say, "Just kidding," but no one did. People were actually reaching into their pockets and tossing their keys into the bowl like this was totally normal. My brain couldn't process it. My own wife pulled her car keys out and started walking toward the bowl. I grabbed her arm before she could drop them in. "What the hell is this?" I whispered, trying not to make a scene. Amanda gave me this wide-eyed innocent look, like she didn't understand why I was upset. "It's just a bit of fun," she said, as if swapping partners for the night was on par with playing charades or karaoke. I could feel my blood boiling. "You knew about this, didn't you?" I asked. She shrugged and said she didn't think it was a big deal. A big deal. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her flat out I wasn't doing it and that we needed to leave immediately. That's when she started making a scene. She accused me of being uptight, of ruining her night, and even suggested I was overreacting because I didn't trust her. The audacity. People started noticing our argument, and I could see a few heads turning in our direction. I didn't care. I told Amanda I wasn't about to stand there and watch her drop her keys into a bowl like we were swingers. She had the nerve to say, "Well, maybe you should open your mind a little." Couldn't believe my ears. This was my wife, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone. And here she was, acting like this was some harmless experiment instead of a massive betrayal of our marriage. I stormed out, but not before making it clear to Amanda that I was leaving with or without her. She didn't follow me right away. Instead, she stood there glaring at me like I was the bad guy. Eventually, she came out, but not before making sure everyone saw how difficult I was being. The car ride home was dead silent except for a few passive-aggressive remarks from her about how I embarrassed her in front of our friends. I didn't even have the energy to argue. Since then, things have been tense, to say the least. She insists I'm overreacting and refuses to apologize. I keep replaying the whole night in my head, trying to figure out how I didn't see this coming. Was this something she's always wanted? Was it a spur-of-the-moment thing? I don't know what's worse, that she went along with it or that she hid it from me until we were already there. Either way, I feel completely blindsided. Am I crazy for thinking this is a huge deal? I can't shake the feeling that this has broken something between us. What do I even do from here? When we got home that night, I thought the whole ordeal at the Smiths' party would be the last we'd speak of it. I was wrong. Amanda wasn't done. She brought it up the next day, saying she didn't understand why I was so upset. "It's just for one night," she kept repeating. Like that somehow made it okay. She went on about how it was a harmless way to add novelty to our marriage and how everyone else seemed perfectly fine with it. Hearing her talk like this was surreal. Amanda had never brought up anything like this before. Not even close. She was always the more adventurous one in the relationship. Sure. But this felt like a whole other level. I told her straight up that I wasn't comfortable with it and that it wasn't going to happen. "You're not the only one in this marriage, Amanda," I said. "What about how I feel?" She gave me this frustrated look, like I was the unreasonable one. "John, it's not like I'm asking for a divorce. It's just one night, and it's not like it means anything," she argued. That hit me like a punch to the gut. Not like it means anything? How was I supposed to believe that? To me, our marriage meant something sacred. And here she was, acting like it was just a suggestion box she could drop wild ideas into whenever she got bored. Then she dropped the bombshell. She wanted to go back. She said she regretted leaving the party early and that it wasn't fair I dragged her out of there. I felt my chest tighten. "You're seriously saying you want to go back to a party like that?" I asked, barely able to keep my voice steady. "Are you hearing yourself?" Amanda didn't even flinch. "I don't see what the big deal is. Everyone there is in a relationship, too. No one's forcing you to participate if you don't want to." That was the moment I realized we weren't just having a disagreement. We were on completely different planets. I told her if she wanted to throw away everything we'd built together over some trashy excuse for a party, then maybe I didn't know her as well as I thought. I gave her an ultimatum right then and there. "If you go back to that party, Amanda, we're done. I mean it." She stared at me like I just slapped her. "You can't be serious," she said, but I didn't back down. "I am," I replied. "I won't stay in a marriage where my wife thinks something like this is okay." For a moment, I thought she'd change her mind. Her expression softened, and she almost looked like she regretted pushing things this far. But then her jaw tightened, and she said, "You're being ridiculous, John. You'll see this isn't a big deal when you calm down." I watched in disbelief as she turned and walked out the door. She didn't even look back. She stayed out all night. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her laughing with someone else, slipping her keys into that bowl. The betrayal felt like a knife twisting in my chest. How could she do this? How could she choose that over us? The next morning, she came back home like nothing had happened. I was still sitting on the couch, staring at the door. She looked tired but unapologetic. "I stayed at the party," she said matter-of-factly, like she was admitting to staying out late with friends. "It wasn't a big deal, John. I think you're blowing this way out of proportion." That was it for me. I told her we were done. She rolled her eyes and said I was being dramatic, that I'd cool off eventually. But she didn't get it. This wasn't something I could just get over. How could I trust her again after this? How could I even look at her the same way? Now I'm sitting here, wondering if I did the right thing. Was I too harsh? Should I have handled it differently? Or did Amanda just show me who she really is? I feel like I've lost everything, and I don't even know where to begin picking up the pieces. When Amanda walked out that door to go back to the Smiths' party, I felt the weight of 18 years of marriage collapsing all at once. I couldn't believe she'd chosen to go, and worse, that she didn't even seem to care about what it meant for us. I sat there in our quiet house, staring at the walls and replaying the whole night in my head, every detail sharper and uglier than the last. I told myself maybe she'd come to her senses. Maybe she'd wake up, realize how badly she was screwing things up, and come home apologizing. But hour after hour passed, and the house stayed empty. Around 3 a.m., I finally gave up and went to bed, though sleeping isn't really what I'd call it. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, cycling between anger, heartbreak, and sheer disbelief. Around 7 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a voicemail from Amanda. My heart stopped. Was she finally coming to her senses? I played the message, hoping to hear some kind of remorse, but what I heard made my blood run cold. "Hey, John," she started, her voice casual, even cheerful. "I just wanted to check in and let you know I stayed the whole night. You really missed out." There was a laugh, light and carefree, like she was talking about a great movie I'd skipped. Then she added, "It was eye-opening, you know? I think I needed this, to feel something new. I hope you can understand someday." Understand? Understand? My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Who was this person? This wasn't Amanda, my wife, the woman I thought I'd grow old with. This was someone completely unrecognizable. Cold, selfish, and cruel. As if that wasn't bad enough, she left a second voicemail about an hour later. In this one, her voice was softer, almost dreamy, as she described her night. She didn't go into graphic detail, but the implication was clear. She'd spent the night with another man. It was just different, she said, as though she were discussing a new dish she tried at a restaurant. I think it's something we both could learn from, you know? To grow. That voicemail broke me. I sat there, stunned, the phone still in my hand, listening to the words over and over like they were in some foreign language I couldn't quite process. She had crossed every line imaginable, and she didn't even seem to care. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was how cavalier she was about it, how she acted like it was no big deal, like I should just accept it and move on. I couldn't stay in that house anymore. I grabbed my keys and left, driving aimlessly for hours. I didn't even know where I was going. I just needed to be anywhere but there. Eventually, I found myself at my brother's place. He opened the door, saw my face, and immediately knew something was wrong. I told him everything, every awful detail. He listened, didn't interrupt, didn't try to offer advice, he just let me get it all out. When I finished, he said, "John, you can't let her do this to you. You deserve better than this." And he was right. I couldn't let Amanda make me feel like I was the problem here. I'd spent the last 2 days questioning myself, wondering if I'd overreacted, if I was being too rigid or controlling. But hearing her voice on those voicemails, that erased any doubt. This wasn't about me being unreasonable. This was about her breaking the trust and foundation of our marriage beyond repair. I drove back home later that night, but it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stranger's house, filled with memories that were now tainted and painful. I sat down and started writing out what I wanted to say to Amanda. I wasn't sure if I'd ever get the chance to say it to her face, but I needed to get it out of my system. When Amanda finally came home the next morning, she didn't look guilty or ashamed. She looked content, like she'd just come back from a spa weekend. That made it all the worse. I told her we needed to talk, and for once, she actually sat down and listened. I told her I was done, that this was the end, that I could never trust her again after what she'd done. She tried to argue, of course. She said I was being narrow-minded, that I was stuck in the past, and that she thought this could be a new chapter for us. Every word out of her mouth was like gasoline on a fire. I told her there was no us anymore, and that I wanted her out of the house by the end of the week. She didn't take me seriously at first. She rolled her eyes and said I'd calm down eventually. But when she realized I wasn't backing down, her tone shifted. She got angry, calling me selfish and accusing me of throwing away our marriage over one little thing. I didn't let her guilt trip me. I stayed firm, and when she saw she couldn't manipulate me, she stormed out of the room. Now, I'm sitting here in the ruins of what used to be my life, trying to figure out where to go from here. I know I made the right decision, but that doesn't make it any less painful. I've lost the person I thought was my partner, my best friend, my everything. And for what? Some cheap thrill she couldn't even be honest about. Reddit, I don't know how to move forward. I feel like I've been hit by a train, and I don't even know which direction it came from. I just needed to get this off my chest. Any advice would be appreciated. The moment I told Amanda I was done, I knew the fallout was going to be messy, but I didn't realize how much of a toll it would take on every part of my life. I felt like I was bracing for impact, waiting for the wreckage to settle. The hardest part, of course, was the kids. Lily, Edward, and Thomas mean everything to me. They're the reason I've worked as hard as I have, putting in late nights and weekends in the IT field to make sure they have the life they deserve. With a 6-figure salary and careful planning, Amanda and I had built what I thought was a stable foundation. A beautiful home, savings for college, and a future I was proud of. Now, it felt like that foundation was crumbling, and I had no idea how to protect the kids from the fallout. The morning after Amanda came home from the party, I sat her down and told her we needed to talk logistics. I made it clear. I was filing for divorce, and I wasn't going to drag this out any longer than necessary. At first, she laughed. like it was some empty threat I wouldn't follow through on. "You're being ridiculous," she said, crossing her arms. "You're not going to ruin our family over this." That's when I told her I'd already contacted a lawyer. Her face dropped. I'd spent most of the previous day researching the best family law attorneys in the state, and I found one with a reputation for being aggressive and effective. It took a $15,000 retainer to secure his services, but I wasn't going to take any chances. If Amanda wanted to play games, I was ready to win. She didn't take the news well. She accused me of being manipulative, of trying to control her, and of using my income to punish her. I calmly explained that this wasn't about punishment. It was about moving forward and ensuring our kids were taken care of. "You made your choices, Amanda," I said. "Now I'm making mine." Of course, things only got uglier from there. Amanda started throwing around accusations that I was trying to take the kids away from her, which wasn't true. I told her from the start that I wanted shared custody because, no matter what, she's still their mother. But that didn't stop her from trying to paint me as the bad guy. She even tried to guilt-trip me, saying the kids would resent me for breaking up the family. I told her point-blank, "The family was broken the second you chose someone else over us." The kids, bless them, didn't know what was going on yet. I wanted to shield them for as long as possible, but I knew we couldn't keep it a secret forever. Amanda and I agreed to sit them down together to explain the situation. It was one of the hardest conversations of my life. Lily, being 13, was old enough to understand what divorce meant. Her eyes welled up with tears, and she kept asking why. I wanted to be honest without dragging Amanda's choices into it. So I told her that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes and that we thought this was the best way to move forward as a family. Edward, at 11, seemed more confused than anything, and little Thomas just looked scared. I reassured them over and over that we both loved them and that none of this was their fault. It broke me inside to see them hurting, but I knew it was better than keeping them in the dark. Amanda sat there silently for most of the conversation, only chiming in occasionally to say we'd still be a family, just in a different way. I could see the guilt flicker across her face, but she never once took responsibility or apologized. Once the kids were in bed, I sat down and went over the finances. Between my income, Amanda's part-time freelancing gigs, and our shared assets, around $1.5 million. I thought we could navigate this without destroying each other financially. But I also knew Amanda might not play fair. She'd already shown me she wasn't the person I thought she was, and I wasn't about to underestimate her. The lawyer I hired didn't waste any time. He started drafting the paperwork and laying out a strategy to protect my income and ensure the kids' needs were prioritized. He explained that, given my salary, child support and spousal support were inevitable, but with proper planning we could minimize the damage. I gave him every detail about our assets, our savings, investments, real estate, retirement funds, and he assured me we'd approach this with a clear, calculated plan. Amanda, on the other hand, wasn't as organized. She started throwing around threats about taking me to court and making me pay for what she called my overreaction. It was exhausting. Every conversation turned into an argument, and I started keeping my distance just to avoid the constant tension. The only time we could talk civilly was when it involved the kids. Even then, I could see the resentment bubbling under the surface. Despite everything, my focus remained on Lily, Edward, and Thomas. I made sure their routine stayed as normal as possible: school drop-offs, soccer practice, piano lessons, bedtime stories. I wanted them to feel stable, even if everything else was falling apart. Amanda, meanwhile, seemed more concerned with her social life. She started going out more often, staying out late, and coming home looking like she'd been at a party. I didn't ask questions. At that point, I didn't want to know. Now, I'm waiting for the paperwork to be finalized and bracing myself for the next round of battles. Part of me feels like I'm in a nightmare I can't wake up from, but another part feels strangely relieved. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm taking control of my life instead of letting someone else dictate it. The kids deserve stability, and I'm going to do everything in my power to give it to them. As for Amanda, I don't know what the future holds for her, but I know one thing. I won't let her drag me down any further. This is my line in the sand. I just hope I can keep standing strong. In the weeks following Amanda's betrayal, I found myself grappling with a storm of emotions. Anger, hurt, disbelief, but mostly anger. The kind that keeps you up at night, replaying every detail, every choice, every word. I didn't want to be that guy, consumed by revenge, but as I sat in my lawyer's office going over the divorce plans, I couldn't shake the thought. Amanda and everyone at that party had acted like they were untouchable, like their actions had no consequences. I wanted to prove them wrong. During one of my conversations with my lawyer, I brought up the idea of looking into the other participants from the Smiths party. I'm not saying I want to ruin lives, I explained, though deep down, I wasn't entirely sure if that was true. But if these people think this kind of behavior is fine, maybe the world deserves to know who they really are. To my surprise, my lawyer didn't dismiss the idea outright. He warned me about the risks, potential lawsuits, reputational blowback, but said he'd help me navigate it if I was serious. That's when I reached out to one of my oldest friends, Greg, who happened to work in media. Greg had a knack for digging up dirt, and when I told him about the party and the key swapping, he was immediately intrigued. "Wait," he said, leaning forward as I recounted the events. "You're telling me there's a whole group of suburban couples doing this stuff out in the open? And nobody's talking about it?" "Not yet," I replied. "But they will." Greg got to work right away, tapping into his network of contacts. One of them was a freelance journalist, Sarah, who had a reputation for exposing scandals that other reporters wouldn't touch. When Greg told her about the party, she was hooked. "This could be huge," she said during one of our phone calls. "But I'll need proof. Names, photos, details, everything." I hesitated. It was one thing to want justice. It was another to blow up the lives of people I barely knew. But then I thought about Amanda's voicemails, her carefree laugh, her complete disregard for the family we'd built together. That was all the motivation I needed. Greg and Sarah started digging. They interviewed people who'd attended the party, discreetly of course, and managed to get hold of a guest list. Sarah even had a photographer pose as a waiter at one of the Smiths' subsequent events, where many of the same couples had gathered. Over the course of several weeks, they compiled over 30 candid photos of couples acting far more intimately than they should have in public. Some were holding hands, others sneaking kisses, and a few were outright groping each other like teenagers at prom. When Sarah showed me the photos, my stomach churned. There, in the middle of it all, was Amanda, laughing with a man I didn't recognize. He had his hand on her lower back, and she was leaning into him, completely at ease. I felt a fresh wave of rage. This wasn't just about me anymore. These people had built lives around lies, and it was time the world saw the truth. The article Sarah wrote was nothing short of explosive. It stretched over 6 pages of the city's most read newspaper, complete with blurred photos and anonymous accounts from attendees. She didn't name anyone outright, but the descriptions were specific enough that anyone who knew the participants could connect the dots. She painted a vivid picture of the key party culture, framing it as a secretive but widespread phenomenon among affluent suburbanites. When the article hit the stands, the city practically imploded. Social media blew up with speculation about who was involved. Local Facebook groups became hotbeds of gossip, with people dissecting every detail of the article. Husbands and wives started eyeing each other suspiciously, wondering if their partners had been keeping secrets. One particularly juicy thread even theorized about the identities of the party's ringleaders, with the Smiths' names coming up more than once. For Amanda, the fallout was immediate. Her phone was flooded with calls and texts from friends and acquaintances, some demanding explanations, others cutting ties altogether. At first, she tried to deny everything, claiming the article was exaggerated or outright false. But when someone from the party leaked an unblurred photo of her cozying up to her new friend, the jig was up. I won't lie, there was a part of me that enjoyed watching her squirm. For the first time, she couldn't brush off her actions or play the victim. She was forced to confront the consequences of her choices, and it was clear she didn't like what she saw. The Smiths, meanwhile, became pariahs practically overnight. Their once popular parties were now the stuff of whispered scandals, and they stopped showing their faces in public altogether. Rumor had it they were planning to sell their house and move out of state, though I couldn't confirm that. As for me, the article didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the pain or make the divorce process any easier. But it gave me a sense of closure, a way to reclaim some of the power Amanda had taken from me. Most importantly, it sent a message. Actions have consequences, no matter how untouchable you think you are. Now, I'm focused on moving forward, finalizing the divorce, supporting my kids, and rebuilding my life. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm in control of my own story. And that Reddit is a pretty good place to start. The fallout from the article was bigger than anyone could have anticipated. The moment it hit the stands, it was like a bomb went off in the middle of our town. Even though the photos were blurred and the names weren't directly mentioned, people had no trouble identifying who was involved. The details were too specific: the lavish backyard at the Smith's place, certain outfits described in the text, and the general vibe of the crowd. People started talking, connecting the dots, and within days, the key party participants were the talk of the town. A few names stood out immediately. One of them was a prominent businessman who owned several car dealerships across the city. Another was a city councilman who had built his career on a platform of family values. Both men tried to deny their involvement, but the evidence was damning, especially when unblurred photos started circulating online. Social media became a frenzy of speculation, accusations, and memes. Their reputations were in shambles, and their families weren't far behind. A few families imploded almost instantly. Divorce filings skyrocketed as spouses demanded answers and accountability. At least 3 couples that I know of packed up and moved out of town within weeks of the scandal breaking. It was clear they couldn't handle the shame or the constant whispers. The Smiths, who'd been the epicenter of the whole debacle, put their house on the market and vanished without a word. Their social media accounts disappeared overnight, leaving behind a ghostly silence where their extravagant lives had once been displayed. And Amanda? She wasn't spared from the storm. People in her social circle began cutting ties, either out of disgust or fear of association. The moms at the kids' schools started avoiding her, no longer inviting her to coffee meetups or PTA events. She became an outsider almost overnight, and it hit her hard. She tried to reach out to me, of course. The first attempt came just days after the article hit. She showed up at my office, unannounced, looking pale and exhausted. "John, can we talk?" she asked, her voice trembling. I didn't even let her in. "There's nothing left to talk about, Amanda," I said, my voice firm but calm. "You made your choices, and I've made mine." She didn't take no for an answer, though. Over the next few weeks, she called, texted, and even wrote me a letter. In one voicemail, she said she was sorry for everything and begged for a second chance. "I made a mistake," she said, her voice cracking. "I thought I wanted something else, but I was wrong. I just want my family back." But I couldn't do it. Every time I thought about forgiving her, I'd remember the voicemails she left after that party. The way she laughed about her new experience, like it was some kind of victory. I couldn't unhear those words or forget the betrayal that came with them. It wasn't just about what she did. It was about the way she treated me and our marriage like they were disposable. I made it clear there was no going back. "Amanda, this isn't something you can apologize for and expect to fix," I told her during one of our rare civil conversations. "You broke something that can't be repaired. I'll always care about you as the mother of my children, but that's where it ends." The kids, thankfully, were shielded from most of the drama. I kept their routines as normal as possible, and Amanda seemed to understand that pushing her way back into my life would only hurt them more. Lily, being the oldest, probably sensed more than she let on, but she didn't ask questions and I didn't offer answers. The divorce was finalized a few months later. My lawyer ensured a fair division of assets, though Amanda fought hard for more than I thought was reasonable. In the end, I kept the house, most of my retirement savings, and custody of the kids for the majority of the time. Amanda got a portion of our savings and a small spousal support payment, which stung a bit but was worth it to close this chapter of my life. Now, as I look back on everything, I feel a strange mix of relief and sadness. Losing Amanda was painful, but losing the illusion of who I thought she was hurt even more. Still, I'm grateful for the clarity I've gained. I know what I deserve now, and I won't settle for anything less. The scandal, as explosive as it was, eventually faded from the headlines. New gossip replaced the old, and the town began to move on. But for those of us who lived through it, the scars remain. Some people learned their lesson, others didn't. As for me, I've started to rebuild, focusing on my kids, my career, and myself. It's not easy, but it's a life I can be proud of. To anyone reading this, here's what I've learned. Trust your instincts, stand your ground, and never let anyone make you feel like you're asking too much for basic respect and loyalty. Because at the end of the day, you deserve nothing less. The fallout from the article was even bigger than I expected. Once it hit, there was no containing it. People in the city quickly connected the dots, even with the blurred photos and anonymous accounts. It turned out some of the couples at that party weren't just suburban parents. They were prominent figures in town. Business owners, executives, a school board member, and even the husband of a local councilwoman were implicated. The gossip spread like wildfire. Everywhere I went, grocery stores, coffee shops, even the gym, I overheard people talking about the key party scandal. Names were thrown around, and rumors swirled about which couples were involved. For some, it was pure entertainment. For others, it was a wake-up call about the secrets people kept behind closed doors. As the article gained traction, the fallout became more personal. A few of the party participants who'd been recognized saw their marriages disintegrate almost immediately. At least 3 couples filed for divorce within weeks, and several others started selling their homes, likely trying to escape the embarrassment. A few people reportedly moved out of town altogether. The Smiths were at the center of the storm, and their reputation was utterly destroyed. They shut down all their social media accounts and went radio silent. Word was they were trying to sell their house and leave town, though no one seemed to know where they'd go. Amanda wasn't spared from the chaos either. Her name wasn't mentioned in the article, but enough people recognized her from the leaked photos. Friends and neighbors started distancing themselves, and her usual social circle grew colder. The confident, carefree facade she'd worn at the party crumbled under the weight of public judgment. For the first time, she seemed to realize the gravity of what she'd done. She tried to reach out to me, leaving voicemails and sending long, emotional texts. In one, she wrote, "I made a mistake, John. I see that now. Please don't throw away everything we've built together." Another time, she showed up unannounced at my temporary place, tears streaming down her face as she begged for a second chance. But by then, I was done. The damage was too deep, and there was no going back. I told her as much, though I tried to be civil for the sake of the kids. "Amanda," I said during one of her attempts to apologize, "you made your choice. Now we both have to live with the consequences." She cried, pleaded, even tried to shift the blame, but I stood firm. I couldn't let her manipulate me again. The divorce process was long and grueling. 9 months of paperwork, mediation, and heated arguments. Despite everything, I wanted to be fair when it came to the kids. They didn't ask for any of this, and they deserved as much stability as we could give them. In the end, we were granted joint custody, though the kids spent most of their time with Amanda since they stayed in the family home. It hurt, but I knew it was the best arrangement for now. At least they wouldn't have to change schools or leave their friends. As for me, I rented a house in a nearby town, about 15 kilometers from the old family home. It was close enough to see the kids often, but far enough that I didn't have to run into Amanda or anyone else from our former social circle. The house cost $4,000 a month, which wasn't cheap, but it was worth it to have a space I could call my own. It wasn't home yet, but it was a start. Adjusting to life after the divorce hasn't been easy. Some days, the loneliness hits hard. The quiet nights without the kids, the holidays split between 2 households. It's a constant reminder of how much has changed. But there are bright spots, too. I've thrown myself into my work, taking on new projects and even mentoring younger colleagues. It's been a welcome distraction and a way to channel my energy into something productive. The kids seem to be adjusting, though it's clear they're still processing everything. Lily has been the most vocal, asking questions about why things ended the way they did. I've tried to answer as honestly as I can without putting too much weight on her shoulders. Edward and Thomas seem to be coping in their own ways, quietly but resiliently. I make it a point to be there for them as much as possible, whether it's showing up to soccer games, helping with homework, or just hanging out on weekends. As for Amanda, I've heard bits and pieces about her from mutual acquaintances. She's trying to rebuild her reputation, though it seems like an uphill battle. Part of me feels sorry for her, but mostly I feel relieved. Relieved that I no longer have to carry the weight of her choices. Relieved that I'm finally taking control of my own life. I'm not sure what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm moving forward. The road ahead might be uncertain, but I'm determined to make the most of it, for myself and for my kids. And that, I think, is enough for now. Rebuilding my life after the divorce has been a journey, one filled with highs, lows, and a lot of introspection. For the first few months, my focus was solely on work and the kids. Work became my sanctuary, a place where I could pour all my energy and keep my mind occupied. My performance soared, and I even landed a promotion that came with more responsibilities but also more satisfaction. It felt good to channel my efforts into something productive. The kids, as always, were my anchor. I made sure to be there for every soccer game, piano recital, and school event. I didn't want them to feel like they'd lost their dad in the chaos of the divorce. They've adjusted well, all things considered, though I know they still feel the weight of the changes. Lily is entering high school now, and she's become more independent but also more curious about relationships. Edward and Thomas are thriving in their own ways, and their laughter on the weekends when they're with me is the best sound in the world. After the divorce was finalized, I started dipping my toes into the dating world again. It was awkward at first. Everything from setting up a dating profile to figuring out what to talk about on dates. I met a few nice women, some I even saw for a few months, but I've been cautious. Trust doesn't come easily anymore, and I'm not in any rush to give anyone a key to my house, both literally and figuratively. The metaphor isn't lost on me. One woman I dated, Rachel, brought up the idea of staying over one night after a few months of seeing each other. She joked about how I must have trust issues because I hesitated. She wasn't wrong, but I didn't know how to explain it in a way that wouldn't scare her off. I've learned to set boundaries, and while I'm open to the idea of love again, I've realized I'll never tolerate deceit or disrespect in my life. As for Amanda, I've heard through mutual friends that she's been dating other men. I don't keep tabs on her, but bits and pieces trickle back to me. Apparently, she still doesn't understand why her actions hurt me so deeply. She's told people she thinks I overreacted, that I should have been more open-minded. Hearing that makes me sad more than angry. It's a stark reminder of how differently we view the world and relationships. I've accepted that Amanda and I are on completely different paths now. Whatever regret she might feel hasn't led to any real self-reflection, and that's something I've made peace with. I hope, for her sake and for the kids, that she finds some kind of clarity one day. But that's her journey, not mine. My focus is on building a stable, happy life for myself and my children. I've started traveling more when the kids are with Amanda, exploring places I've always wanted to see but never had the chance to. I've joined a hiking group, taken up photography, and even signed up for cooking classes. Rediscovering myself has been liberating, a reminder that life doesn't end with heartbreak. Most importantly, I've learned to value my own peace. I've created a home where I feel safe, where the door locks aren't just physical but symbolic of the boundaries I now hold firm. I've come to understand that trust, once broken, isn't something you can rebuild overnight. It takes time, effort, and the right people. I'm not bitter anymore, just cautious. Cautious but hopeful. I know love is out there, and maybe one day, I'll find someone who earns the key to my heart and my home. Until then, I'm content with the life I've built. It's not perfect, but it's mine. And that, I think, is a pretty good place to start again.